everyone! So today we are going to be covering the basics of influenza epidemiology. So let's jump right into it and discuss what influenza is. So influenza, which is most commonly known as the flu, is a contagious illness that primarily impacts the respiratory tract and is caused by different influenza viruses. It will frequently infect the nose, throat, and lungs. As we have learned, since this particular infectious disease is not caused by a bacteria and it's caused by a virus, it cannot be treated with antibiotics. In addition, it is estimated that approximately 3 to 11% of individuals throughout the United States develop the flu every year. And the best preventative method for the flu is by getting a flu vaccine on an annual or yearly basis. So there are 4 different types of influenza viruses that affect the world: A, B, C, and D. Influenza A and B are very common throughout the United States, and the A strain of this particular virus is the only one that has caused flu pandemics on a global scale. Influenza C viruses usually only result in mild illnesses if they are contracted, and at this current time, they are not known to have caused any epidemics throughout the human population. Additionally, influenza D viruses do not infect people. This strain primarily only impacts cattle. What is really interesting is the CDC uses these different strains as well as human serology data in order to predict which season should bring which strain, as well as the general response of the human immune system to these immunizations when they come into contact with different viruses like influenza. So how is the flu transmitted? Like a lot of the other diseases that we've covered, flu viruses can primarily be spread by a variety of different reasons, such as coughing, sneezing, and talking. In addition, you can also develop the flu after touching a certain surface or an object that has the virus on it. An infection can occur in this particular instance after touching an individual's mouth, nose, or eyes. That's why I always continuously reiterate the importance of washing your hands. In addition, the incubation period for influenza is anywhere from 2 to 4 days on average. As always, this number can vary on a case-by-case basis, and it is reliant on a multitude of different factors. But like I mentioned, 2 to 4 days is a rough estimate of what is expected regarding incubation for flu. I also wanted to include some information pertaining to the infectious period for influenza. On average, individuals who have been diagnosed with it have the highest levels of transmissibility in the first 3 to 4 days after onset of symptoms. That means that they have the highest risk of giving it to other individuals within this time frame. It's also important to mention that this number varies depending on the type of infectious disease that you're examining. And while influenza has the highest levels of transmissibility in the first 3 to 4 days after symptoms start, other diseases are not like this, and oftentimes you can be extremely transmissible before symptoms even show. Some of the primary signs of influenza infection include fever, chills, cough, sore throat, runny or stuffy nose, muscle or body aches, headaches, fatigue, and also vomiting or diarrhea are more common symptoms in children, but they can occur in adults as well. Now let's talk about flu season. A lot of times healthcare providers will throw this terminology around, but what does it really mean? In the United States, influenza activity typically begins to rise somewhere around October, and this can extend as late as May. However, most of the time we do notice that there are peaks throughout the winter. So I went ahead and I ranked these months listed on the slide in regards to the high levels of transmission that we have seen over the past. So in February, we have historically seen the most flu cases, followed by December, January, and then March. So now let's jump into influenza epidemiology. This chart represents the positive tests that were reported to the CDC by several United States public health laboratories. And this is a summary from October 2nd until January 21st, 2023. So this is recent data. Now, looking around, we can see that the predominant strain that we are seeing in this flu season is A, H3, and 2. In addition, there is also A with subtyping not performed, as well as A H1N1. However, we are not seeing very many B strain cases, and we can see a peak around the 48th week of 2022 as well. So at this current time, we are on the downward side, but like I've mentioned prior, this stuff is subject to change always. Now let's look at another epidemiological graph. However, this one is a cumulative rate of laboratory confirmed influenza hospitalizations among cases of all ages. And we have different colored lines for the different years and flu seasons that this chart is representing. So as we can see, the 2022 to 2023 flu season is still ongoing. That's represented by the red dotted line. We also need to take note that hospitalizations for this year, the 2022 to 2023 season, are a little bit higher earlier than the others. And in 2017 to 2018, we had a very high number of hospitalizations in comparison to the other seasons. Also, in 2021 and 2020, which is represented by the orange line, there were virtually no hospitalizations for influenza specifically. All right, so the graph that we just saw was cumulative. Now let's look at these same statistics weekly. And I think this graph does a better job expressing the peaks that we've seen. And like I mentioned in the other one, this year's flu season clearly depicts that hospitalizations were up much earlier than what we've seen on average before. In addition, like I also mentioned, there were more hospitalizations in 2017 and 2018. In general, we are in the top 3 seasons regarding hospitalizations, though. We are very close to the 2014 and 2015 season, as well as the 2017 and 2018 season as well. I also wanted to provide some flu statistics. So this table represents estimates of the incidence of symptomatic influenza by season and age group throughout the United States. And it has the breakdown with the seasons as well as the predominant viruses that were going around. So as we can see, we do typically see A strain flus, as well as season severities for each year, and the incidence with percentages by age group. And this correlates really well with the other 2 graphs that I provided, because as we can see, the 2 seasons where there was high severity were also the 2 seasons that were peaking very high regarding hospitalizations on the other 2 charts. And we can see that these incidence percentages are correlating with the season severity. So for example, in 2021 and 2022, we did see a low season severity, but if we look at the incidence, we can also see that these percentages are low as well. Whereas if we go to 2014 and 2015, the season severity is high, and in addition, the incidence is relatively high for this particular season as well. That is all for the influenza epidemiology video. I hope you all enjoyed it.